Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, wherever you are. I hopped on a couple minutes early, but today we're going to be doing a fun live watercolor class where we're going to be channeling some abstracts and some different lessons. Let me know where are you guys watching from? How's your day going? And then also I want to vote on, I came on a couple minutes early to vote on a couple things for those of you who are a little bit early. One is I will use two different paint palettes today. It's been a couple weeks since I've used the Viviva ones and there were quite a few requests, but they just didn't quite win. So this is going to be one of them that I'm going to use, but I can use another one. I can use my palette. I've got a core palette that I'm really liking right now. I can also use Koi, Winsor Newton, the Culture Hustle Stuart Simple one. It's your birthday, happy birthday. Are you doing anything fun for your birthday? So if there are any requests for a specific palette, please let me know. We're going to use Viviva on some of them, or maybe we'll mix them all together. But then I just need to pick another palette. Winsor Newton is the request. Let's see. Do we got any others? Do you guys want to vote on it, or should we just go with that one? Grab my Winsor Newton. I have this one on hand because a lot of people have it. I don't actually reach for this palette very often. I've had this palette for almost 2 years and I've barely touched these. It's not a bad palette, it's just not one of my favorites. But yeah, I keep this on hand because I know a lot of people have this and sometimes it's nice to paint with the same things. So we still have a few minutes until we're officially going to start, but I'm going to give you guys a little heads up just in case you want to kind of prep what you're thinking about. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to learn, a lot of you will already know some of these techniques, but I recommend following along because it kind of goes with the lesson today. But we're going to be taking a picture, and some of these pictures in here are pictures that I took and some I got from Unsplash. And we're going to choose a couple pictures and then we're going to create abstracts using some principles and some techniques that we're going to learn at the beginning of class. These are some of the ones that I created. You just bought a new color. Oh, that's so exciting. I love getting new palettes. I don't know. I keep wondering, like, it's kind of like that, the TikTok audio. Is it enough? Some people will say it's never enough. I just love them. They all have something a little different about them. Okay, so just as kind of a quick little example while we're waiting for everybody else to join, this image is what I used to create this one here. So this is kind of the inspiration. I took some of the same shapes and I tried to use some of the contouring, but I bumped up some colors and things like that. This one here was kind of based on this. And let me find the other one. I did a bunch of these yesterday because they're so much fun to do. Let's see. This one here was taken kind of from this. I took some of the shapes and things like that. And then I did a couple more here. This one I did based off of this here. I guess I could turn it upside down for you guys. And then I was having so much fun with this last night that Nick actually came in and did one with me. So we both did one based off of this photo, and this is one that I got on Unsplash, and this was my version of it here. Hello, hello, and this was Nick's version. So at the end of today's class, everybody's is going to look a little different and you might take some different lessons from today's class, but we're going to have a ton of fun. So let me re-repeat all that kind of stuff that we just went through so that those of you who are just joining now can hear. Hi, Sunny. Hi, hi, hi. All right. So What we're going to be doing today, for those of you who don't know, my name is Lacey. I'm the artist behind Rebel Unicorn Crafts, and on most Saturdays, thank you guys for understanding. Last Saturday, I just needed a bit of a break. We do a live watercolor class together, and it kind of varies the topic. Sometimes we'll do something where we all paint the same thing. Sometimes we will be experimenting with stuff, and sometimes there's like a real lesson. I'm going to put heavy quotes around real lesson because each one of these can technically be a real lesson, but this one we're going to be kind of learning some specific skills, and then the idea is that it's kind of like an assignment. You guys interpret those skills and take what you want or what kind of resounds with you from this lesson. So what we're going to be doing today specifically is we're going to take some images, and we already voted, so the two palettes we're going to use for today are going to be the Viviva color sheets and the Winsor Newton. So we're going to do a couple different paintings, and we are going to be choosing, what should we start with, the techniques, or do you guys want to start? Actually, let's start with techniques because it might inform what ones you guys decide that we're going to do together. So I do want, if you guys have a scrap piece of paper or something like that, that would be great. We're going to do a couple little exercises together, and I'm going to start with the Winsor Newton for this. But you need some paper where you can kind of just follow along in case you haven't done any of these techniques before. If you've got your colors out, go ahead and spritz them so they can get nice and wet and just sit there, because in a minute that will make them easier for us to actually grab the colors. Yeah, I'm excited for the Viviva. They have some really interesting effects that are way different than other watercolors, so they're perfect for abstracts. So we're going to be doing two things today to get started. First, if you're going to do this with me, take whatever piece of paper you're going to be using and split it into 8 parts. So right down the middle and then 4. They don't need to be perfect. Obviously, mine aren't perfect. But we're going to kind of talk about some of the possibilities of watercolor. It's been a while since I've done anything that's kind of like watercolor technique based on a live. And so just in case there's anybody on here who's unfamiliar with any of these, I do want to go over some of them. All right, let me grab a piece of paper. I'm not going to tape this down because this doesn't really matter so much. Because we're just experimenting, this would be a great time to use the back side of a paper or some scrap paper or something. But I'm just going to split this straight down the middle. And then I'm going to split it into 4 segments on each side. So we're going to do 8 different techniques. The first one we're going to do is a flat wash. And we're also going to do a gradient. Then we're going to talk a little bit about blooms. We're going to drop in some color. We're going to do a little bit of layering. A dry brush technique. I haven't really talked about this much. We're going to do some wet on wet action. Then we're going to do some lifting. You'll also need a second piece because we're going to do a little experimenting with our brush. Okay, there are a couple questions. What does light fastness mean in watercolor? It just means basically the colors, how well they're going to hold up against sunlight. Some colors, especially like pinks and things like that, if exposed to constant sun exposure, like directly in a window kind of a thing, or if you just left them outside, those colors would fade. And so some colors fade less than others. For the most part, it doesn't super matter. Most of the time you hang them inside and they're not in direct sunlight, so it's not that big of a deal. If you're super worried about it, you can always frame things under like a UV protective glass. Okay, so we can grab whatever colors we want, but the first thing I want us to do is mix up a little bit of any color. I'm going to do a blue. Yeah, let's do a cobalt blue. I think this is cobalt, or is this ultramarine? But I'm just going to put a little water in here. Then I'm going to take a damp brush, and this was already dried in here, so I'm just going to use what is there. I'm going to mix up some color here. And the very first thing I want to talk about is when we do a flat wash of color, yeah, you can just kind of scribble, but if you're not real careful about how you put that color down, you can have some unintentional blooms and backgrounds and things like that. So let's just quickly talk about my favorite technique for making a flat wash, which is called the drip line technique. You're going to take whatever you're going to be painting on today, you want to hold it at an angle. Then we're going to fill our brush up with some water, and you're going to make one stripe across. Now the reason why we hold it at an angle is because we want that drip line to form, so we need gravity to help us. You refill your brush, and then you make another line, grabbing that drip line and pulling it down. You just refill as you move down the page in this little square. And then when you get to the very bottom, you're going to take a paper towel or something, and you're just going to tap your brush off here and suck up that extra water at the bottom. This is how you get a nice flat wash of a single color over an entire area. It will be nice and smooth and even, and you won't get any of those back runs and things like that. Now for our second one, I want to darken this color just a little bit. But we also want to mix up a second color because we're going to do a gradient, and it's a similar technique to before. I'm going to put some water in there so I have enough to actually go across this. And let's go for a nice yellow color for now. Ooh, maybe a little green. There was a little bit of blue on my palette. Okay, I'm going to wash my brush off. And for this one, in order to make a fun gradient, there are a bunch of different ways to do this. This is just one of the easier ones that I think is fun to do. Is you're going to start the exact same way you did your flat wash, holding your paper at an angle. You're going to grab some of your initial color. You're going to pull that across so you get that nice drip line. And this works a lot better if you have more space to do this. But we're just kind of seeing the general effects of this. And we're going to slowly dip the tip of our brush in to that yellow. And after you do that first one, then you can kind of transition over to adding in more. And again, you can see this effect a lot better if you have a much larger space, and I could have made my colors a little bit darker so that we could actually see it a little better, but that'll give us a nice gradient. So that's a really good thing to kind of practice with this. Let's see, I think I'm losing a little bit. Of your comments. Yeah, we're doing watercolor today. You can feel free to join in. The first part of this class, you're going to want to be using watercolor or just kind of wait patiently for a minute. The second part of this class you could do with any sort of art supply because part of what we're doing today is we do want to harness watercolor techniques, but the other part is we're going to be doing some just general art lessons. Okay, now I actually do need to make this color a lot darker. I'm going to grab a tester strip because I haven't actually been testing the color as I go along because I want to show you one of my favorite techniques, which is blooming. So let me just pack in some more pigment here. That's going to be better. I'm going to grab some of, this is like their Prussian blue. I'm going to put some of that in there. I actually like this blue a little better. Maybe just a little bit more. All right, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move my camera downwards. If you are prone to motion sickness, you might want to look away for just a minute, but I want you to be able to see this up close. Ready, set, go. Okay, so for this, we don't need to be as careful because we're going to be adding some texture anyways, but you just place your color down. And while it's still wet, wash your brush off. And then I want you to tap it lightly. We don't want to take all of the water out. We just want to take out most of it. And then you're just going to tap into that color. And when we drop in this water into that color, it's going to bloom out. It's going to push some of that pigment away, and it's going to create this really interesting texture. Oh, thank you so much, Sunny. I love how helpful you guys are. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we can do the same thing, but with colors. So let's say you wanted to, instead of dropping in water, you wanted to take some, maybe let's put some yellow down here. I'm going to wash my brush off again, tap it off. I can actually dry it. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of this blue and we can drop in that blue. This is kind of like a wet on wet technique, but we're mainly just kind of stippling and dropping in that color and kind of just letting it sit. And that will, again, it kind of pushes some of the pigment from the underlayer apart. It will blend a little bit, but it just has some interesting effects. All right, real quick, let's go ahead and place some of this blue here because we will need to do some, we're going to talk about layering in a minute, but it does need to dry. So place a thin layer of some blue, just something like this. You can maybe even pick up a little bit of that so it will dry a little bit faster. And then let's just ignore that square for a little bit while we work on the other ones so that it can dry. Yeah, I do record these and I upload them to YouTube. I actually think I forgot to upload one from a couple weeks ago, so maybe I'll put both of those up tomorrow. All right, one that I have not really talked about or touched on, but is beautiful in abstracts. It can be beautiful in a lot of different applications, but by adding some additional texture with a dry brush technique, what you want to do is grab your paper towel so it's handy. Then you want to grab whatever color that you want to do this with, and then tap your brush off so that it is pretty much dry. There will still be some color and stuff in the bristles, and then you just take, oops, I took too much out, still did. But what we're trying to do is get where it starts to get thin. So you just want a little bit. You might need to play with this a little bit to see, because they call it a dry brush, but it's not really dry because we're working with watercolor, so things have to be a little wet anyways. This might take you a couple times. Nick actually did this activity with me last night. He's one of my best testers, and I don't know if you'll be able to see things here, but yeah, he had way too much water. He was able to get it a little bit later, so if you struggle at first with actually getting kind of that texture of the dry part, it's totally fine. It's just all part of getting to know your art supplies. Yeah, it kind of does look like sparkling water. That's totally true. This would be great. So that's the perfect observation for today. My goal for today is for you to take all these little lessons and observe things like that, because then it might help you inform how you paint something in the future. You might think, oh, I already know how to make some sort of fun water type things. I just need to do this dry brushing technique. That's perfect. All right, now for two of my favorite and fun ones. Let's start with this wet on wet technique. All I want you to do is, one, if you have access to a light source, it's going to help you, like if you've got a lamp kind of near you or an overhead light or even a window, but I want you to place some water on this little square down here. Doesn't really matter how you do it, just place it down. And then I want you to hold it up to the light, and let's see if I can get a reflection where you guys can see too. What we're looking for here is different things are going to happen depending on how wet this paper is. See at the bottom here where there is some of that water that just kind of moves around and runs around? That means we're going to have almost no control. Basically, it's going to do whatever it wants. The colors are going to bleed into there. They might spread around. They might move if the paper starts to buckle or you move the paper. Then if we look kind of up, let me try to get that in focus again here. If we look up here, towards the top, you're going to see that you can tell it's wet, but it's mattified. And what that's going to do is it's going to slightly soften the edges. So like up here, but not much is going to happen. It's going to basically stay in the same places, but it's going to soften the edges. And then my favorite type of wet is that kind of in-between wet where it's like real shiny, but we can really see the texture of the paper through, and the water is not flowing around. If you need to, and I do need to because I've talked so long, I'm going to re-wet a little bit of this. Just double check. There, I got that nice glisten. I don't know if you guys can see this, but I got a nice glisten, but I can see the texture through. And then you can either grab these colors that we mixed up, or you could take colors directly from in here and just drop them in and see what happens. Oops, mine is not wet enough. Let me add a little more water. Let's add in a different color and just see how much they move. Move them around, see what happens. Also, different colors are going to have different effects. They're going to move different in this water. Some are going to bloom more, some are going to bloom less. Let me show you, because on like these Viviva ones, they typically spread a little bit more than those ones. So if we put this in here, it's going to really kind of bloom out. It's going to spread a little bit more. But just play with this. Just kind of see how certain ones sit. Some of them are going to bloom. Some of them will have this really big bloom that will kind of make a ring around everything. And yes, this is a 140-pound watercolor paper. All these effects are going to work the best if you have some sort of a watercolor paper. I recommend cold press, although today I am going to paint at least one of these on a hot press piece of paper just so you can see a little difference. And then our final one we're going to do today is, this isn't the end of the lesson, but the final little technique we're going to talk about today is lifting. And you can lift doing a bunch of different things. So you can lift using, I often like to use a paper towel. I've got a bunch of other things I can lift with, but we can actually just lift with our brush, which is what we'll do today, just to kind of play with it. And all you're going to do is when you place a color down, so let's place this color down here. And I was touching down there. Can you see how it's repelling certain areas? I actually put the oils from my hands there. But in order to lift, all you're going to do is wash your brush, tap it so it's damp, and then you can just lift that color out. Now, you might want to try this with a couple different colors. These colors are not very staining, which means that you're not going to see anything underneath. Whereas like this one that Nick was doing last night, this had a pink staining effect, so even though it lifted some of the color from it, you can see this kind of pink stain underneath. And certain colors are going to stain more than others. The Viviva definitely stain more. And sometimes, like on this, which one is it? I think it's this Persian blue, I'm trying to remember. This Persian blue color. If we put some of that down, just, oh my gosh, I love this color. Let's place some of that color down. And then if I lift from this, notice how it has this pink stain underneath it. So getting to know your colors that you have is going to tell you a couple things. It's going to tell you about their limitations, because maybe if you're painting clouds, you don't want that pink. Maybe you really want it because it'll help with the like sunset type effect. But this is such a unique thing that we can harness, or you might want to choose a different blue color. And if you don't kind of play with some of your supplies, you're not going to know some of that stuff. This is one of my favorite ones because I like that pink understanding because it's like super surprising and it's beautiful. Okay, so what we learned so far, and here's another one with some different colors here, is we talked about a flat wash, a gradient, blooms, dropping in some color. We started on the layering. Once it's dry, you want to let it dry. We'll go back to that after I talk about these other ones. We did dry brush, wet on wet, where we just kind of let whatever happen. Oh my God, look, a little rainbow appeared. And then we talked about lifting. Now, layering is one of the things that can really, really help you in watercolor, but it can be frustrating because you have to wait. You need to wait for things to dry, and that can be frustrating to say the least. You can use a hairdryer in order to make sure things dry a little bit faster, but I know that sometimes this is the hardest part, is learning when to wait and actually let it layer. So What we want to actually do, just to kind of demonstrate some of the effects of layering, is let's take a color that's going to, when it does mix with it, be nice. So I've got blue, and I'm going to take a yellow, and I'm going to make sure I make this little stripe go above and on and below, because you can actually see this is a nice yellow. Then right here, it's got kind of a greenish type color because we've kind of glazed or layered over. And the transparent nature of watercolor means that we can make a lot of changes by adding in a layer on top of something else. Let's just put a different color on top of there too. This is a kind of like a muddy red color that was just on my palette. You can see just some fun effects. Now, one thing, when Nick was testing this out with me last night, one thing I saw him doing that I don't want to say it's nothing in any sort of art is wrong. However you want to do it is totally fine, but there are some unintended effects. So when he was doing this last night with me, what he would do is he would go and place this color down, but then he would sit here and do this with his brush. And what then actually happens is you're not really layering, you're kind of like inlaying it into it. By kind of scrubbing with your brush, you're going to end up lifting, and you're also going to kind of mix all of those colors together, the colors that were underneath and on here, so you're not going to have as much of a difference between here, and you're going to have kind of lifted some of that off. So when you are layering, you want to kind of focus on just placing the color down and letting it kind of just live where you've placed it rather than continuing to mess with it. I don't know why, but this little rainbow is making me so happy. Okay, so there are our 8 different techniques. Next thing I want you to do is mix up a fun color, whatever color you want. Maybe you're feeling a pink, maybe you're feeling a blue. You could mix up a couple colors too. And I'm just going to grab another piece of this paper. You could do this in a little, again, this is a great exercise for the backs of some old pieces of paper or just in your sketchbook. But the next thing I want us to do is get to know all the shapes that the brush that you're using can make. This is my brush. This is that size 12 round brush. So I know some of you guys have this one, so you can make all the same shapes as me. But you might not be using this brush, and so you might have either more capabilities or you might be a little more limited by your brush, just depending on the one that you have reached for, and that's totally fine. But all we want to know is what can it do? Oh, yes, absolutely. So if anybody needs to screenshot this, here are the different techniques that we just talked about. I'm going to take it away in just a second. And it's gone. There we go. Okay. So we're getting to know our brush. Whatever brush you have is totally fine. You might have a different preference. I personally paint like 95% of everything I paint with this one single brush. And the key to it is because it has a nice tip, and then it also is a slightly larger watercolor brush, so it can hold a lot of water, so I can do a lot with it. And that's one of the things that I really like about watercolor is that you can kind of limit the number of supplies. Now, I am a supply hound, and so I have a ton, but with my watercolor supplies, it is easier for me to keep it simpler, which means I can travel with it easier, and you can also, it's a little more budget friendly because you don't have to constantly have something new. All right, so I'm going to mix up a fun color, and maybe let's actually switch over to the Viviva ones just because I want a really pretty bright color. And I'm going to bring you've got gouache, nice. I'm gonna bring my camera up just a little bit. So again, if you have any, oh, thank you so much. If you've got any motion sickness, look away right now. And 3, 2, 1. Just coming up a little bit. All right, we're reset. And I'm kind of thinking I want to play with, ooh, what color do I want? I'm thinking I want this Viridian color. I am getting a little bit low on this set. But if anybody has this Viviva set and you haven't kind of set up this little wax paper panel, this can be super helpful for mixing up colors kind of on the fly. But this is the color that I'm going to be using. When it is too dirty, you can just take a wet cloth or paper towel and wipe it off. You can use a flat brush for watercolor, sure. I personally haven't really used one very much for it, so I don't have very many tips for that. But yeah, absolutely. I know sometimes it's a little jarring. It's like every once in a while when I watch a live, it reminds me of being like on FaceTime with our young nephew where he just like runs around and you're like, oh my goodness, where are we going now? Why do I feel sick? Anyways, all right, so with whatever brush you have, experiment. Try just kind of whatever shapes normally happen with your brush. Okay, so that's if I meet the taper. If I were to just take the tip, how thin of a line can I make? How much does it move and kind of stretch if I really press this down? If I really load it up, can I get more or less? Then also play with kind of the motions that you can make with this. So can you make kind of like talon type shapes? This is a fun shape. Let's just fill up this page with a bunch of different shapes. What about squiggles? How does it move when you move it up and down? Does it move different when you move it up and down like this than if you were to move it like this down the page? Try varying, try varying the pressure. So use the very tip of a brush, and you could do this with a, oh, I need more color in here. You could absolutely do this with a different type of brush, like a flat brush or a round brush or something like that. You can vary pressure on those as well. Just get to know what types of shapes. Also, maybe if we, swirl it around, what kind of shapes can we get by swirling our brush? Just give it a go. What happens if you make a nice line like this, straight down? What happens if you kind of jitter your hand down the page? What about just the tip? What types of shapes does that make? What about check marks? I don't know, just play with it. Fill up your whole page using some different shapes and just see what types of shapes that you can just naturally make with your brush. Get to know it for just a second. Yes, exactly. These are great for leaves. Oh, that's another good one. So when you are varying the pressure on your brush, try varying it while you move it. Because then you can make those little C shapes, which will then make you a nice, like, a fatter leaf too, in addition to thinner leaves. Size 10 is your favorite? I use size 10 as well. Size 12 is definitely my favorite though. But size 10 is a close second favorite. Yeah, feathers would be great for that too. All right, so far we learned a couple techniques. We've gotten to know our brush. Now, what are we going to do with this? So, the next thing I want us to do is we are going to make some abstracts. We're going to take a look at a couple pictures in a minute. And first I'm going to show you the ones that I made when I was experimenting with this idea. But the idea is to take some of these things that we just learned, and then we're going to take a couple principles that I'll talk about in a minute, and we're going to make an abstract piece using a picture as inspiration. Okay, so let me address a couple questions really quick. You have an 8. Does it matter size of brush versus size of paper? Yes, to a degree. A size 8 will work great for smaller pieces. The real thing when you are looking for a round brush, you want to look for one with a really nice tip because, like, hold on, I've got a smaller brush. Let me grab one. So this is a size 6. And let's just take a look real quick. So how thin of a line can I make with this? This is a size 6. I could make a nice thin line. But if your tip is nice enough, you can make just as thin of a line with a slightly larger brush. So that's why I tend to use like a size 12 versus a size 8 or a size 6, because if the tip is nice enough, you can do all the same stuff that a size 6 or 8 can do, but you can also do slightly larger things that will hold more water, so you can work on a slightly larger piece so that you don't need multiple brushes to work on something. Okay. So that was my slight little tangent. Let me show you what I made. And none of these are necessarily meant to be, I do actually like a couple of these, but none of these were meant to be like absolutely perfect or whatever, but the idea is to take some lessons away from these. So here is one abstract I did that was based on this photo here. So this is a photo I found on Unsplash, and I was just searching for different city type things, and this was my abstract interpretation. So in this, I combined a gradient wash, I did some different brush strokes, I played with some dropping and color on wet here and here, and I did some other wet on wet techniques, and then I did some general line work. Yeah, you guys are always, please ask questions. If it's not something that like Sunny or somebody like that is helping answer in the comments, I'm happy to address. I'm also happy to address pretty much everything, but I know Sunny and them help me with my most frequently asked questions that they well know the answers to by now. So this is one. Again, it's not necessarily meant to be like a perfect representation, but we're kind of playing and we're just using this as inspiration. Now I did a couple more over here. So like this one here was based on, I actually really like this one, but this was based on this picture of a road, and all I tried to do was add in some pops of contrast color. I kind of tried to get the feeling of some of those darks and lights, and then I played a lot with just using my line work to kind of mimic some of the shapes and things that are in there. And then I pushed some, you love to help but no teaching. Oh my goodness. But just kind of played with pushing some of the boundaries of some of the color and things like that. How to simplify certain things. One of the things that doing these exercises is going to teach you is, where can you let go of control when you are painting something? Where is sometimes one single line going to tell a better story than constantly overworking an area? So there is a question about how difficult is watercolor compared to other mediums? And this is a complicated question to answer. I will address that in just a second. I'm going to just put this one here. This is another one. This is a more literal representation of it, but simplified. But again, trying to use some of those simple brush strokes for this. While you guys take a look at this for just a second, let me talk about how difficult watercolor is. Now, my first stance is going to be that it's going to differ for everyone. So, you're going to find mediums that you click with and mediums that you're like, no, this is not working. So that answer is going to be slightly different for everyone. If you really want to learn watercolor and it's just not clicking with you, but you're better at something else, maybe focus on that for a while and then come and revisit this when you're kind of in a better space and not just focused on it. My personal opinion on watercolor is that watercolor is one of the more kind of scientific-esque types of mediums where there are all these principles you can learn. And so I personally think that, like, of all the mediums, watercolor has the best learning curve in getting to know it. Now, then to really master it, it's a much harder thing. So the first half of your journey is going to probably be easier in watercolor than the first half of your journey in acrylic or oil or something like that. But the second halves is where it's going to differ. So that's a really complicated question. I don't know if I actually answered any questions, but there are my ramblings on the topic for now. Okay, let me show you. I've got two more examples that I just want to quickly show you guys. You typically use acrylic. Yeah, that's what I started with. I actually, quite honestly, I feel like I'm probably actually a better acrylic painter. Like, look, I just finished this little dude. His name is Schubert, and he's got really funny ears, and he's very sweet, and he looks like a Disney dog. But I don't know how to teach that, and I don't know how to explain it. It's just something that, like, just happens with my hands. I don't know. Whereas this makes sense to me. And I also really crave the looseness of watercolor, so it is very freeing for me. It's kind of therapeutic in a way. All right, so this is based on this one, and I just kind of flipped the script on some of the colors, but I was inspired by some of the shapes and things like that. And then this final one is actually my favorite of my little experiments, and I can also show you, and I know a few of you saw this earlier, but I can show you because Nick did this with me last night, too. So this one here is inspired by this. And I really love how this turned out. I barely had a plan for this. But this was Nick's interpretation, and I also really like how he chose some of the shapes and things like that. And it's funny, you look at this, and you don't really think of anything at first, but when you do actually see this, you can really kind of see he got the motion really well. There's definite motion and composition that is similar to this, even though it's not the same. So, what does this mean for today? Well, what I want us to do is I'm going to show you guys some different pictures. You can choose the same pictures I used, or I've got some other ones. We're going to select two, and we're going to work on two together. But what I want us to do is take what we learned earlier, and then I want us to take these three ideas and maybe just choose one idea, but maybe the picture that you choose, you're only choosing it for color scheme. So maybe you look at this and you think, the pleasing parts of this are the pinks and the purples, the bright greens and those bright yellows, plus some kind of more neutral shades. Maybe you're literally just going to take the color scheme from the photo. Another option is to take the shapes. So you can take a look at something and think, what do I like about this? Well, I really like these like round balls. And these would be perfect to make those round balls and then drop in that color. And I really like how, like this leaf here, it kind of is like a little squiggle. Maybe that's kind of the shapes that you take from these. So maybe you're just going to choose the shapes, or kind of like what Nick did where he chose the shapes and the direction of things. Yeah, he did nail the colors for sure. Or maybe you're going to choose something like the composition. So in general, I mean, like I took a few liberties obviously with that one, but I did take the basic composition of this one. So I kind of cut it off at the same horizon line, but I did maybe change at least one or two colors in it to make it a little more dramatic. So we're going to combine the things we learned, and then I want you to choose one or two of these things here and try to apply those with these. Now let's take a look at some of these photos that we have as options. And you guys are just gonna have to kind of vote in the comments. Yeah, absolutely, go grab everything. Let's start talking about possible options. So I'll maybe separate them into a couple different categories. So I've got a couple flowers. This is my most recent bouquet that I made. This is one of my favorite bouquets that I ever made. There's a flower farm near us, and I love the colors of this. So we could do some flowers. I grabbed some city stuff that might be kind of fun to grab. General shapes. I thought this one would be really cool. This reminded me, I cannot remember, if you're on, please comment down below, but somebody sent me a really beautiful picture they took on vacation. It's kind of reminded me of it a little bit. And then here's some farmland stuff. I also printed off a couple fruits and veggies. Some sunsets. or then we have these same ones that I worked on. So first, let's start with, let's pick one first. So you guys vote, do you want landscape, flowers, or city first? You can use mixed media on watercolor paper, yes. Okay, we had a bunch for cities, but flowers are making... Okay, this is telling me that today we're gonna do cities and flowers. Okay, so I think we should do this one. Yeah, I saw a couple people mention this specifically, and I think this could be really fun in a wet-on-wet application, and taking some of this. And then let's pick one of these flower ones, because I saw a bunch of people for flowers. Which ones? You want these ones? So tell me if you want the yellow balls or you want the one on the right. Okay, I think I'm seeing a bunch of people for the left one. All right, cool. These are going to be the two that we're going to make our abstracts based on today. If neither of these are vibing with you today, that's totally fine. You can find your own source image and do kind of the same exercise based off of whatever image is speaking to you today. Okay, let's start. I'm thinking this one is going to be... trying to figure out which one is better suited to Winsor Newton and which one is better suited to Viviva. We might mix them together a little bit because the Vivivas are so much more pigmented than the Winsor Newton ones. And that doesn't mean that one is better than the other, but if we want to really kind of bump up some contrast, we might be layering with both. I'm kind of thinking that I need to do this one with Viviva because the Winsor Newton is more limited in the pinks, and the pinks are really prominent here if we want to kind of focus on some of those pinks. And I think it'll be better. We'll do Winsor Newton on this one. Yes, let me show, I'm just going to make a little note for myself here so I don't forget what I'm doing. So here are the things to think about. Think about the color scheme. So do you just want to copy the color scheme and then do your own thing? Do you want to take the shapes and the lines? Do we want to do composition? And maybe, I don't know. Okay, so here's what I'm personally thinking about. So what I'm personally thinking about is on this one, if I were to look at this, what this one is telling me is I love the shapes and lines in here, and I love the color scheme. The composition is okay. It was not meant to be a wonderful photograph that I took. It was just like, ooh, I like this pretty bouquet. So what I'm thinking that I want to do is use the color scheme shown here, maybe even bringing in some of these neutrals because that definitely helps with it. But then focus on things like, ooh, look at these fun curves. Notice how many curves there are in this one. I love the balls. Things like that. So I think on this one, I'm going to be taking the color scheme and then kind of mimicking some of these shapes and lines, but not exactly, they're not going to all be in the same order, and they're not going to be composed in the same way. This one, I think I am going to treat this one more similarly to the one that I painted that was kind of like this, where I did the basic composition, but I just tried to really simplify things and maybe bump up a few colors. So I'm going to wait to reserve a little bit of judgment on this one until we actually get into it, because I really want these colors in here. But then I might be able to either really push this to a much darker color or maybe add in a surprising color there. I'm going to kind of wait and see what I think. Okay, so let's start with the Winsor Newton one, because that's what I have out right here. And I'm going to grab, this is some Strathmore paper that I'm using today. Strathmore is a good paper. If you've got it, it works great. It's not one of my favorites, but I do have a couple little sketchbooks that I'm trying to use up right now. So that's what I'm going to be using today. I need to get some fresh paper towels. And I'm going to move some of this. Now, you can choose to, I'm kind of thinking one of the things I'm going to do, if you're worried that you're going to just kind of try to mimic exactly this, which would then end up being disappointing because you're like, why didn't I just paint flowers, is I'm going to work vertically instead of horizontally so that I'm forced to have to move some stuff around. I don't really use watercolor pencils. I've had quite a few questions and people asking me about them. I like watercolor markers better than pencils, but I don't have any good tips. If anybody knows of anyone on here or even on YouTube or something that does really good watercolor pencil tutorials, please put them in the comments because I'd like you guys to have some help with that. And I don't think I'm the person for it. I'm going to tape mine off just because I like to have the nice little crisp lines. You don't have to tape yours off if you don't want to. You can mix colors on parchment paper. That would probably work too. The only downfall of that if you're using watercolor is that it's nice to have a little well. You can use ice cube trays if you don't have them. You can use old yogurt containers, something like that. You can kind of cobble together something, but it's nice to have something with a little bit of depth so that if you're trying to mix up enough of one color to cover an entire area, that it will be able to go there. My favorite paper is, I don't know. The papers I use a lot are Canson, Artist Loft, and then when I'm feeling fancy, I like Arches. And there's another new one that I can't see right now, but there's another new one I tried that I liked. So I mainly just like having a lot of paper so that I can do whatever I want at any time. Okay, so the first thing I'm kind of feeling is my favorite thing about this are these little yellow bobbles. So I'm going to start by putting in a bunch of bright yellow bobbles, and then I'm going to use that color drop-in technique that we talked about at the beginning, where I'm going to drop in some kind of greenish colors in it. You can interpret this however you want, so let me try to keep this here so that you guys can see this throughout. Is that in frame? Should be. Okay, so I'm going to take this yellow that I already mixed up here. Maybe I'm going to add in, ooh, I had a little bit of other color in there. If you ever get color that you don't want on your paint, you can just grab your brush and kind of wipe it off. I'm going to put a little more saturation in here. And I'm just going to put these kind of wherever I feel like. You could use some of those art rules. Art rules are always meant to be broken, so if you're like, I don't really want to do that, don't do it. But you could use kind of the rule of thirds, so this is technically that upper third, left third, and I could put another one down here that would kind of fall into that same rule. You can also use the rule where you use odd numbers. So I'm going to put in 3 of these. Where do I want this one? Well, I want one to come off. I'm going to put one where it's halfway off. I might add in more of these. Yeah, I think I want more of these. I really like these little bubbles. Let's put another one here. You feel free to mimic what I'm doing if you're like, I don't know what I want to do. That's totally fine. But if you're like, no, I only want 3 or I want more or whatever it is, this is your piece, so you can change it. This is Winsor Newton. This one is expensive. Is, you know, it's kind of a loaded term because it depends on what your budget is. One of the reasons why I don't particularly recommend Winsor Newton is that it's not super expensive, but it is more expensive than some other ones, and I feel like their quality is similar to some of the ones that are not as expensive. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a tricky question to answer because it really depends on what your budget is and things like that. So I'm just dropping in some of this green into those wet areas here. This is that drop-in technique we learned. Now, One thing that I'm feeling a kind of a need for is adding some sort of shadow to these, because I'm like, oh, I'm working on these flowers and they need shadowing to make them seem more like balls. Well, I don't actually need these to be shadowed, because I'm not doing that, but I'm kind of feeling like I want to give the essence of it. So if you're feeling that, maybe lean into it. So like one thing that I'm kind of tempted to do, and since I'm working on an abstract, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to take some of this Prussian blue color here. I do love this color in the Winsor Newton palette, this Prussian. I think is this Prussian, or I can't remember which one this is. It's something like that. And I'm just going to swoop underneath each one of these to kind of be like, look, it's a shadow. I don't know. Sure, why not? Some of them it's going to bleed, some of them it's not. If you have an instinct that tells you to do something like that, do it. Ooh, I like how that bled into that one, so I'm going to actually, oops, trying to figure out how to make sure I keep everything in frame for you guys. I like how it bled, so I'm gonna kind of make that happen on more of these. It's just kind of fun. How long does it take to dry? That's going to depend on a couple things. What's your humidity level where you live? How much water did you put on the paper? In general, if you don't have standing water, probably about 5 or 10 minutes. If you've got standing water, it can take an hour. If you need to move on and you're impatient, you can use a hairdryer to speed it up. Okay, so I've got my first kind of thing here. I'm liking these shapes. It does kind of speak to me in the same way that this does personally. This is just a personal opinion. Now, the other colors I want in here are, I definitely want some of these kind of sagey greens and some of the bright greens. Or I think I'm going to lean more towards the sagey, because I think that this is going to kind of give some of that just green color here. So let's mix up kind of a sagey type color using this palette. So I'm going to use, this is a little bit of like burnt umber and burnt sienna in here. I'm going to use that as a base. Just put a little water in here. And I'm going to take some of this green, a little of that viridian color, and then let's just steal some of this color here to bring it more over towards the blue side, and that will give us kind of a nice sagey type green. They do look like snails. I love that. Oh my god, they do, totally. Okay, so what am I feeling now? What do we want to try to put in? I'm kind of feeling like, what shapes does my brush make that would be really nice? This might be a good dry brushing type thing maybe, or do I want to do blooms? Do I want to layer this? Let's just make them kind of those general shapes of those eucalyptus leaves. So they're blobs basically, but maybe bigger than these. I don't know. You can have a different answer than I do. I'm just going to blob that here. I'm going to add another blob. You could wait for yours to dry so you can layer on. Or you can just move on kind of like what I'm doing. Maybe another blob down here. And then let's drop in some water, or I'm going to drop in some water into these to create those blooms, just because I want some more texture. All right, I don't know what I'm going to do on this next, so the best thing to do when you're stumped, let it sit and think about it for a minute. Plus, that's going to allow us, I'm going to work on that Viviva one next, and that's going to allow this to dry a little bit so that we can unlock some layering possibilities and things like that. Oh my, I cannot stop seeing the snails now. They totally look like snails. Now I want to paint little snails. Yeah, now all I really want to do is just add black pen details and give them those little snaily eyes. Oh my goodness. All right, I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I'm going to set this to the side for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to the Viviva one while I just let things happen on there. And I am also going to be using this. This is a Viviva like notepad, and this they don't, well, when I bought this, they don't specifically say whether or not it's hot press or cold press, but it's much smoother, so it's way more like a hot press piece of paper. So that's what I'm going to call this, is hot press paper. And let me, just trying to reorganize stuff here. All right, so let me put this one here. This is the one that we're working on here, is this kind of cityscape. I do want to keep the composition. I really like the composition on this one. So I'm going to keep it basically the same. And again, I am going to tape mine off. You don't have to tape yours off. If you're not feeling it, that's totally fine. All right, do I have a certain type of black pen with watercolor? This really depends on when you like to add your pen. I'm personally somebody who likes to add it at the very end if it feels like it needs it, which means I just wait for it to dry and I can use any old type of pen I want on top. I typically reach for, especially when I'm just kind of practicing in my sketchbook, just this simple Papermate Flare felt tip pen. If you like to ink first, then watercolor, then you're going to need to find a truly waterproof watercolor or waterproof pen. And you need to make sure, they've got a bunch of different ones. What I've actually been liking to do is, I bought this from Stuart Simple, this Blink ink, and I love how dark this is. And then I just use a dip pen and put it on. Well, I'm glad you guys that I like that I go with the flow. That is one of the things that really helped me. You know, one of the things in order to get better at art is being able to do more of it. And one thing you can do just to help yourself is not put too much pressure on things. Not everything's going to turn out. Not everything's going to be beautiful. And usually when you do just kind of go with the flow instead of overworking something, it ends up looking better than if you just sit and like nitpick it. And you can learn certain lessons from it. And you can always paint something a second time, where in that first one where you went really with the flow, you might think, okay, this is where I want to rein this in, but I loved what happened over here. Yeah, craft contraption chat for sure. So today I'm using, if you've been following my page for a while, you know that tape has always been kind of a thing. I get so many suggestions on tape, so I finally just decided to test everything out. Typically, what I used to use and what I will go back to using after I use up all this extra tape is just like the cheapest masking tape I can find. Then in order to take the tape off, I use a hairdryer to remove it. Today, one of the things that I'm testing, or that I tested previously, this is washi tape, but this one's made by 3M. I like it. It's good. It's got nice patterns, but it is a little bit too sticky, so it doesn't, it does rip the paper quite a bit. Potentially, you can use a hairdryer to help remove it, but somebody mentioned that the 3M one actually does expire after a year or so, so I'm trying to use that up first. You can use blue painter's tape. Yes, absolutely. You can use any tape you want. The only one that I really did not like was that frog tape, that green tape, because it's coated in something. It's meant for latex. And it basically, it almost has like a cornstarchy type solution or silica or something on it where it absorbs a bunch of stuff and then it clumps around the edges and makes things dry strangely. That's the only one I would say don't use. Okay, let's work wet on wet for this, and I need my Viviva palette. This is the one exception where I do typically reach for a second brush just to speed things up. You can definitely do this with just your normal brush. Let me find my big one. But if you do want to pre-wet a page, Getting a nice flat brush like this, any sort of big flat brush, it's gonna make things a lot easier. I want this all at first to just kind of flow together. So I'm just gonna wet this whole page like this. You can do that with whatever brush you're using, or you can grab if you've got a bigger brush like this. If you're in a really dry climate like me, if you're trying to get a whole page nice and wet, then what you want to do is let it sit for a minute and then re-wet it again, because if it's so dry that it needs to kind of soak in, you're not going to get some of those same fun effects. And then I'm going to come in here and let's just kind of follow the colors that were here. So on this left side, I'm going to grab this vermilion color and I'm just going to fill up the whole kind of left side here. Just going to place that here. So I did a test where I did the sticky tape where you place it. I'm going to go into this yellow color here. And this one I'm going to bring up, but I'm not going to bring it all the way down. Where you actually place it on your skin or on your clothes or something like that. And that's a decent tip, except for if you are a pet owner like me and you ever have any sort of pet hair. I'm going to grab some blues and let's place that here. If it's too bright for you, you can take some water and I'm just going to soften it. This does not need to be perfect because we're doing kind of an abstract based on this. Anyways, so if you're a pet owner like me, you're going to get dog hair or whatever it is on that, and then it's going to open up little cracks underneath. And then it's going to kind of seep under and dry a little strangely. If you have like a super, super neat home, then you won't have that same problem, but I have a dog who sheds a lot and I love her. So and then, okay, so over here we're going to do, if your paper starts to dry, mine's a little bit dry over here, so I am in a place because I've been talking for a while. I'm going to put a little more water here, just not touching that other area. Yes, this is a great kit for traveling because it's super compact. There's a little mixing panel here, and then even when they get wet, they have little wax papers in between so they don't mix together. It is great. This is called Viviva Color Sheets. You can buy this from a few different places. I do actually have this on my store too. I do wholesale from them and sell those on my website too. And they are super fun to play with. They do have their limitations, but they are so fun to play with. And the pigment is just stunning. I'm being a little bit light with the pigment, but these have the possibility of being way more pigmented. So again, I'm just kind of taking some of these block colors, and then let's lighten this because this one, it just kind of stays in that same color. Maybe let's actually put some of that violet color on there. Ooh, let's just go with it. We're going to kind of go with the rainbow theme today. Since that little rainbow showed its little head, I gotta give him his due, you know? And let's go into some greens. So I'm just kind of taking some of these shapes and then I'm just putting them down, not doing much of anything else, at least at the beginning. Should we put an orange in? I don't know. I think I'm gonna leave it there. So I think this is a great start for this, which is how I'm going to kind of interpret the beginning layer of this. Now I'm going to want to do some layering on this. Oops, I accidentally just flicked some of that water. I was not very careful. Well, we're just gonna have to go with it. But I got some speckles of some of my water that I had been mixing up over there on some of the other parts. That's fine, we'll lean into it in a little bit. But I'm gonna let this dry because I wanna do some layering on top of it, a little more line work. And I don't want it to completely bleed personally. If you want to keep working on it, it's totally fine. But in the meantime, we have let this sit long enough to be able to do some layering. I am using the same brush. Also, Don't ever feel like you're asking me a dumb question. My whole page is dedicated to beginning, art stuff and answering questions, because if you think it's a dumb question, it's probably a question I had in the past. And now, if I can help you with answering those questions, I am more than happy to. Okay, so I want to do a bit of layering. This is our kind of inspiration. So now is when I want to bring in some of these bright purple type colors. So let's mix up a nice purple type color. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Hello, hello. Now this is, in truth, with all my issues with, I don't really have a ton of issues with Winsor Newton, but one of the things about this set is I love when there's a good magenta. And this is a nice red color, but I do miss having a magenta in here. Now there are tons of spaces in here where I could just add a magenta, and Winsor Newton does have some magentas and things, but it's not usually one that's included in their base palette. But I want to mix up a nice purple color. So I'm going to start with this crimson color here. Place that over here. Watch my brush, and then I'm going to grab some of this Prussian color. I'm going to mix that in, and that's going to give me, I got to set this down for a second. Let's do a little tester strip just to make sure we know what color we really have, because it's going to look different here than it is on here. So I want mine to be a little more red. Maybe we'll switch out the blue that we're going to put in. Play around with which blue you mix in to make different colors. That's a little more purpley. I'm liking that. And let's take a look at our shapes in here. This is the one where I was kind of talking about how we can do some like sweepy type shapes. Maybe spiral-esque almost, because these do spiral around. I use acrylics as well. I am too impatient for oils. Okay, so I'm going to do some sort of spiraling. I have to decide where to place this, though. I'm definitely missing, there needs to be some balance here, and I feel like there needs to be something that kind of, just take a look at what you have and see like, where are the missing pieces on this? I like this, but it's definitely, it could use a little more structure. Maybe something that kind of moves through here, which would help balance it out. So, all right, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go with this. My instinct is something needs to happen here. So let's actually take this and I'm just going to spiral around in here. I like that dry brush part, so I'm going to kind of lean into that, but I'm going to kind of fix that here. Spiraling it around. Some spirals, yes. There, yeah, I kind of like that. I feel like that does actually balance that quite a bit. Let's spiral from here. Here, or do we want to spiral from here? Here? I don't know. That got a little regular. I don't know why my camera is like, feels like it's trying to focus way more right now. I wish I had overlapped these a little bit more or not touched them. We learn something a little bit different each time we do these. This side is angled, so it doesn't as much. It can, and I just didn't add quite as much water. Okay, I'm feeling like I need just at least a little hint of this kind of down here. So maybe there was a spiral here. And then I'm craving some more contrast of color. So let's just go in. Let's just lean into the color that we do have. We've got this. This is a beautiful red color. It's not so much that pink color, but it is a beautiful red color, so let's lean into that and let's just bring some of that in here. Now all I want to do is just go back and just make this a painting about snails, because I feel like it's better. And okay, so I want you to see one thing that's happening right now. I'm tempted to add in some more of that, but look at how, since I added more pigment to this one, look at how much dimension that ends up giving this. If my camera would focus on it, hold on. I feel like the quality of this is starting to... Hello, if I put my hand here, is that better? But the dimension that I'm getting from this is I'm actually getting way more dimension from this one where I placed more of that pigment, and those other ones kind of fall to the back, and so it actually creates kind of the illusion of some of that pigment. So you know what? Right now, what my gut is telling me is to pause and stop and leave this. So I'm going to leave it for now. And I'm going to go back over to that other painting, which should be at least kind of dry enough for us to move on to some other parts. I might add some more to this, but right now my instinct is telling me, wait. And hopefully my camera will focus in a minute. Maybe I can play with the depth of the camera in just a second. Oh, now it's going to focus. It's going to focus on the wood. Cool. All right. So here is the one that we were kind of working on. Now, I can tell mine is still a little bit wet, but it's probably dry enough to do some of this. Some of the edges might soften a little bit on this. What I want to do on this, what my instinct is telling me, is to lean into each of these colors and add some line work on each one of these that's going to just increase the pigmentation on each one of these, but work monochromatic in the strips. So that's what I'm going to do next. Holy moly, I think you guys broke my record for the number of likes you've given me. Wow, thank you. All right, so let's just start over here because I painted this one over here first. And maybe what I should do, okay, this is, I'm having an idea that I personally think is going to be fun. If this is not fun to you, don't do this. But I kind of think I want to pick a different brush stroke to do those monochromatic things on each one of these so that they have a slightly different texture on each one of these. All right, so let's start. The first one I did was that dusk, or that vermilion color here. I could use a hairdryer for sure, but I'm gonna just wing it for now. I try not to, I know you guys don't really mind, but I don't like putting that noise into your guys' ears because, yeah, I want this to be kind of relaxing. Okay, I'm gonna really saturate my brush in this so that I get a bunch. And I think on this one, I'm just gonna do lines like this. Okay, here's one. I'm gonna wash my brush. And then I'm going to move over to that yellow color. And if this color doesn't show up too much, I could switch over to that yellow ochre color. But this one, let's do something kind of horizontal. I'm gonna do little lines like this. Grab some more of that color. More of that color. And then I'm trying to remember what color I used for this. I think I used that peacock color, the peacock blue, maybe? Yeah, I think that was the color I used. And this one, let's make, I'm gonna make little swoops. This is not my favorite. I wish I had used a different shape for this one, but that's all right. I'm going with it because I'm committed. I think it looks kind of cool. I wish I'd used a different shape, but you know, that's all right. And then let's move over to this green color here. I'm feeling like I need something more horizontal. So let's do some thin horizontal lines or even a squiggle. Actually, let's do a squiggle. I'm going to do that with just the tip of my brush. I'm trying to be a little too light. And then on the purple, I'm going to do some diagonal type stripes where I change the pressure a little bit. And finally that pink. What? I'm going to do little dots on the pink. Just everywhere. Just going to kind of tap my brush, give it some little speckle freckles. All right, so I really like what's kind of happening here. And I like this negative space that's here, but I feel like this could definitely be improved if I added some dark colors down here to kind of lead the eye up into some of these. You don't have to do this if you're like, no, I really like this. Also, metallics could be cool to kind of put into those negative spaces too, but I'm going to add in some, I'm going to use some of this. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this black color and I'm just going to mix it with whatever colors I had kind of down here to make kind of a grayish black type color, and then also just use this up. All right, so I'm going to kind of try to mimic the step down that I was kind of doing with these. And maybe that does shoot up here a little bit. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. If you're like, no, I like it, that's fine. This is what I'm choosing to do though. I'm just going to start by kind of just filling this in. And I'm kind of regretting this, but I think I'm going to try to make it work. So the next thing I'm going to do is kind of try to fix some of these angles that I put down. So maybe sharpen some of the corners a little bit to have some contrast between how flowy everything else is. And maybe I'll even kind of touch in some lines here just to kind of bring them a little bit into this composition a little bit more. Kind of give a little separation. I feel like that helps a little bit. I don't know. I'm a little bit torn as to what I just did, but you know, I did it. I have to live with it. And I can always make another version where I don't do something like this, but in my art anthem, I'm kind of regretting this. Yeah, it's a little too dark. You know what we can do is, while we're still here, let's see if we can lift Viviva R Way More Staining. So let's see if we can lift any color. Not really. I can lift some, but I probably would have needed to work a little bit faster to get some of that, more of that out. Let's try to lift. Okay, if I'm gonna do this, I think the only way to save this is to go in and then just add it in here. Now, yes, I am regretting this, but I'm going to do this throughout. So I'm going to kind of mimic up here as well. If it's easier for you, you can always flip your composition upside down if it's easier for you to work in certain directions. And I'm just going to lean into this because I've already done it. And there's no going back now. This one I feel like had a ton. I think I'm going to do this one again, maybe later tonight or something, and see if I make some different choices, how it turns out. But this actually, okay, I'm already feeling a little better about this. This helps quite a bit. It's not my favorite, but I had to lean into the decision. Okay. And this is your lesson on how to ruin something that was looking super cool. Oh, man. Now, one thing I will say about this, what just happened here is, one, I don't like it as much as I did before. So what I learned from that is that this picture, even though it has a lot of contrast, there's a lot of lightness to it. And what I really did was I just took away a lot of that lightness. So I went in and I, messed with it. But that doesn't mean that this has to be ruined, because we can kind of lean into some of these things. Like I can actually come back in here. And maybe we really take this abstract. Maybe we come in with even darker colors. Again, I might be ruining this, but maybe we just come in and make a whole bunch of, like, maybe this is a little maze. So maybe we bring it in and around. I don't know. Do what the painting is kind of telling you. If you took these steps as like I did and you're like, I'm not convinced, I don't blame you. This is not my favorite thing I've ever done, but I think we can add some interesting textures and things in here to kind of try to save it a little bit. Some nice pen details would actually be really good in here too. Yeah, this kind of looks like carpet too, to me as well. Now that, yeah, you mentioned the thing about the room. Maybe I leave this here so it kind of, it tells the story of those. And maybe, yeah, we turn these into those drapes. Kind of like what you were just seeing almost. Okay, not my favorite, but I feel like it's better. So, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to leave this one as it is. I think this would be a really fun one to do another one, where I kept more of that lightness. Like, I kind of wish, if I were looking at this again, what I wish I'd done is, I liked what I did everything until I added in the super dark colors and tried to push that contrast. But I kind of feel like all I really needed to do was 2 dark lines. and then it would have been this, but abstract. And that's what I wish I had done. It does kind of look like oh my god, it looks like 2 birthday cakes. Yes, I love that. I'm loving all the suggestions. So I think that's a really good lesson. Let's get a time check. So yeah, we are going to be wrapping up here now. This is a really good lesson in art in that not everything you're going to do is going to turn out how you envision or turn out how you want, but you can learn really, really cool things from it. Like, I feel like I learned a ton from this. I feel like I learned more from this, how it turned out, than had it been exactly how I wanted it, because I really can tell how much I kind of lost in the depth, at least initially. I had some of that depth going, and then when I added that dark in, it was too much. The other thing I really like is adding in the contrast of these kind of definitive textures with that really soft transition, working on that wet on wet. And then over here, we did this one that was kind of based on some of the shapes and some of the colors of this here. Not exactly the same. And I love these little snail dudes that happen in here. I definitely think some pen work on those could make them really cute, or just even making them on their own. I might actually kind of play with this a little bit more. The snail thing, you guys are totally right. Take a moment when you do some of these things and just kind of look at things that you like. Like, I really like, if I were to take certain parts of these, I really love this here. I love this yellow, and even though it's kind of monochromatic, I love how much it stands out. Same thing with some of these. And I like this kind of weird area that's happening here. I don't like it necessarily with the whole composition, but I like that part. No regrets, yeah, for sure. Each thing you're going to learn a little bit, and I hope this was kind of helpful. Does anybody have any final questions before I sign off here in just a minute? All right. As usual, I do love seeing these. You can either tag me in videos, or you can send them to me through Instagram. I got the same username here and on YouTube and on Instagram. If you want to tag me over there, I love, love, love seeing pictures. What kind of beginner paint set would you recommend? That really is going to depend on your budget and what's kind of locally available to you. I do sell a beginner set that I really like because it does also teach you a little bit about mixing colors, and I have a mixing color guide. But things like Prang are great for super beginners, especially if you're on more of a budget. The Koi travel palette is nice as well. I like that one. That's another that I recommend. What other beginner ones do I like? Those are the main ones I recommend. Okay, so I don't have anything planned specifically for next week. Do you guys want to give me a few ideas of things in case it's something I feel like I might be able to help with? Oh, do you guys need to do screenshots anymore of things? Do you want me to put anything back in the frame? Like this? Painting skies, snails, depth, maybe the galaxy. Oh, mixing colors would be good. Yeah, if you guys want, we can do a mixing color class. Those are always fun to do. So I've had a bunch of requests for the koi fish with the pond and the tree, or with koi fish. I haven't played with that yet. I don't know if I know how to do that. Faces is probably not me. I'm probably not the person to teach you that. Floral inspiration pick. Yes. If you need this one, this is the picture. I don't know if you want this part, but this is what I had here. This is my image, so I can also, the other thing I can do after this is I can place any of these images that were my pictures on my blog in case you guys want to use them. Exercises in water management. Yeah, I think that's, I need to kind of figure out some exercises that are really good for that, because that is the hardest thing to learn, and it's the thing that's going to help you the most. Okay, I'm kind of thinking there were quite a few people who wanted the mixing colors. Let's do some mixing colors, and yeah, let's do some mixing color things. And then there are some really simple abstract things we can do where we switch colors over as we move through and things like that to kind of turn them into something fun. But let's do mixing colors next week. I need to really write this down so I don't forget. Let me find a sticky note. I'll stick it to my forehead so I don't forget. So I don't forget. Well, I'm so glad you guys enjoyed this. Remember, we all make mistakes. Not everything turns out perfect, but I had a lot of fun doing these. So that's really the best thing you can take from some of this stuff. You are so welcome. I hope everybody has an absolutely fabulous day, and this afternoon I will upload the images that were mine. Not all of these are mine, but you can find them on Unsplash. So that is like this. Some of the other ones, if you liked any of these images, there are a lot of really talented photographers that put their photos for royalty-free use on Unsplash, and you can check them out there. All right, have a great day.